Hi Tubies, here's Alexander again, and welcome to my next painting tutorial. The screams of the people around in the community who wants to have me painting a dwarf from Lord of the Rings don't rip off, so well, this time we will paint a dwarf from Lord of the Rings. The only dwarf model from this range I have is Gimli, and well, he is a dwarf, so I will paint him up. As you can see, he is already glued to a resin base from Micro Art Studios. He's primed in black, and we will start now to paint him. As first color code, I use Vallejo model color Burnt Cat Ready, number 7814. So, and for those of you that wonder why for a vallejo color I use this kind of pots, well, in a previous video I've already mentioned it. I don't like the dropper bottles at all, and so I've changed them to this format of bottles. And if you want to order them, I have provided there a link to the shop, or for example Ultra Battles also sells them, so it's quite easy to get a hold of them. Yeah, what you can see, I will paint his entire cloth in this color, because, well, that's his main color. It's a reddish brown tone, and well, I will provide that with that color. So I will go ahead and paint the rest of his clothing and be right back. The next stage that we do is paint all the boots, the weapon shaft, and all the leather strips in Mournfang brown. So just easy, straight out of the pot. Paint it on. Well, I noticed that the new Games Workshop base colors, they're quite bad if you will dilute them, so be careful. As a first layer, they should be straight out of the pot and not be diluted. I personally don't like that at all, but well, that's the way the cookie crumbles. So I think you get the idea what I'm doing here, so I'm finishing up the job and be right back. Ta-da! So the things are all brown now, and the next step I'll do is paint the flesh parts in the face with Vallejo game color Rosy Flesh, or Rosy Flesh, or however you want to pronounce it. So yes, I know this color is quite bright, but don't worry, this will be dulled down right in time. So the next step will be painting the beard, and for that I use a mix out of Evil Sun's Scarlet and Mournfang Brown. So that gives a nice orangey brown tone. Just like that. Dum-de-dum-de-dum. played a little bit of Portal 2. So, just like that. Simply painting it on. Same back here. So, and at this stage, you might see here, this brush is a little bit damaged. Time to fix him. So, I'll wash him. And now I will search the traitors. Search the evil hairs. So, they should be poking out soon when I treat the brush like that. Come on. Show yourself. Come out wherever you are. Well, there you are. See? And those little traitors will be deleted now, or cut away. Very carefully. Remove the hairs that stick out. Okay. And I hope that the brush is fixed now. Okay. The hairs of the dwarf need another layer. So quickly mix up the color again. Yeah, that should do it. There we have another one, so let's remove him also. And voila, the brush is fixed again. Has a nice tip and nothing to worry about again. Okay, the next stage will be painting the silver parts of the armor. Let's take Iron Breaker for that. Okay, now we'll paint on the chainmail. It doesn't matter if you don't hit every last single corner here. Some of the parts might be a little bit silverish from the miniature itself. Some parts might be a little bit blackish from the primer. That's totally okay, because we will go over it with a wash anyway, and that will hide most of this. So don't worry. Be happy. Happy painting. Dum-de-dum-de-dum. So quite simple, paint all the metal parts, like here, the little blades from his throwing axes. Like that there. And by the way, I'm using here a cork to hold the miniature, and this stuff in here, this is sticky tack, or sometimes also called blue tack. Poster strips, poster tack, however you want to call it. So I will finish all the metal parts and be right back. Sorry guys, it seems that I haven't hit the record button hard enough. Well, as you can see, I've painted now all the bronze parts, like on the helmet here and on the axe, with a Vallejo game color bright bronze. So sorry for that. Next step will be painting here his little mat in green, and I use Caliban green for that. Just a little bit on the palette, and here we go. Just simply paint it on. Well, this stage, as you might have noticed, is the blocking stage. That means I'm simply blocking out all the main colors on the miniature. You don't need to be 100% exact for that stage, because of the wash. You're going over with it afterward, but like that, I flipped the miniature, and here we have now a little mistake, but well, that we will cover later. That's not a kind of a big deal. And that solves the mystery. Do Alexandra ever make painting mistakes? Yes, she does. Yes, she does. So, last thing I will block out is now the rock formation here, and for that I use Ashing Grey. So, just pin it on. This whole blocking out stage is nothing major important or major fancy, just a matter of solid painting. The trick at painting a miniature, well, it's not that hard. There is no miniature in the world that is not to be painted like this here, so if you see this painting tutorial here and you're screaming for a painting tutorial for a different dwarf, for example, or for an high elf, or for something else, it's basically the same. So it's just different colors. So here we are. I will let that dry now and be back in a second. My painting tutorials will find the next stage quite familiar. It's now the washing stage. For this I use now Nuln oil, and quite simply going over the entire miniature and give it a good wash. What that does is, for those of you that are new here, it will give the miniature instant shading. As you can see, all the shadows are created right from the start. It's a very easy technique. just slop it on. And don't be shy with using the wash. So, also here over the rocks. And we are basically done with the miniature for a tabletop standard. Let that dry and you could totally field him on the battlefield. But you wouldn't watch a girl painting tutorial if you don't want to have it a little bit more fancy. And for that, we let that dry, and then I'll be back. So, tubies, the wash has dried now, and that's the way he looks right now. And the next stage will be to highlight him. For that I use corn red and my trusty standard brush. I get often the question what kind of brushes I prefer, synthetic or real hair. Well, I absolutely prefer real hair brushes because they have a much better handling, and the synthetic brushes have a tendency to create a hook at the end. So quite simply paint the highlights now. To highlight means here, as you can see, I have painted the upper parts of this folds in his cloth and left in the folds the dark of the wash. And that way we get a nice transition between the colors. So, like always, very, very carefully paint the highlights in. And now is the stage where you have to be really careful with the painting, and every stroke counts. Sometimes people have problems with the right amount of color on their brush. It's quite easy to, well, adjust. If you take that amount of paint, with that you can't paint at all. So, in order to take on the paint, always make strokes like this, turn the brush a little bit. Sorry for that. And then, with that, you can paint now. And if it is even too much color on the brush, you can simply make strokes on your paper towel here and wipe off the amount you need to adjust the paint on your brush. But over time you will learn how to manage this properly, and then you'll paint like a master. So next step will be mixing in the 50-50 mix of Evil Sun's Scarlet and Corn Red. So, just place a dot of that in the other color and we are good to go. So I will water down the color a little bit. What does it mean to water down a little bit? Just poke your brush. That's too much, like that, into water, and then you go to your palette and mix it in. That way the color gets a little bit smoother and you have better control over the color. And then paint in even higher highlights. Leave a little bit of the old color behind and just paint in tiny strokes of highlights. I know those highlights are not that smooth like, for example, an airbrush could provide it, but personally I like the hand-painted look more than the airbrush smooth surface and smooth transitions. That's the reason why you don't see many airbrush tutorials from me. I personally don't use the airbrush that much. Mainly only for tanks or really big surfaces. There I used my airbrush. And to be honest, to own an airbrush don't make you a good painter. The airbrush is just a tool like your brush or your water pot or whatever. You have to learn how to use it. And voila, the clothing of him looks already quite nice. And people also ask me, how do I get so steady hands? Well, many people like to paint like this. The left hand or the right hand, if you're a left-handed person, holding the miniature in the air and the other hand also in the air. Sure, that provides you with a very, very shaky hand. In order to prevent that, place your hand on the table. The other hand also on the table. And then use your little finger, place it on the miniature itself. So, and on the holding device. And then you're holding the miniature like that. Let's zoom out a little bit so you can actually see my hand holding position here. Like that. You see? And voila, you have an absolutely steady hand. Nothing is shaking at all. But if you go like this, sure, my hands also get shaky. So always place it on the table, press your little finger on the holding device, and then you have a very, very steady hand, and then you can paint very, very carefully. So let's zoom in again. So now we get to the final highlights. For that I use now pure Scarlet, Evil Sun Scarlet, the new version of Blood Red, if you are not familiar with the new colors. So also I will water it down a little bit, and the higher the highlights, the more I water down my colors to get really nice and smooth transitions. Very carefully, only with the tip of the brush. Little fine strokes. And always remember, if you can't reach an area when you're holding a miniature, you can always swap the miniature around and turn it, and you know. Also very important for painting purposes is the right sitting position. So don't use a table that is too small for you, so you have to bend over quite heavy. That gives you a pain in the backside over time. So you have always to be sitting relatively upside down, or upright, sorry. Upside down is not the right word. So, and that way we create here a really nice highlight on this little Gimli. So, I think that's enough. Now let's highlight this little green part at the back. For that I use the previous color, Caliban green. So, like before, painting the main areas and leave the recesses in the dark. Just like that. See? Now I will highlight even more, and for that I use a neutral green tone, like this here, Vallejo model color olive green, and I mix it in a tiny little bit. So this is now a 50-50 mix out of the olive green and the Caliban green. And yes, as you can see, it's absolutely possible to mix Games Workshop colors with Vallejo colors. There's nothing that would hinder you. I get often the question, what color range do I prefer? Old GW colors, new GW colors, or Vallejo model colors, or repop paints, or whatever? And the answer to that is, I prefer actually none of the color ranges at all, because all that matters to me is just the color itself, not the range. All of those ranges are acrylic colors, and they are mixable and behave almost the same. So, the next step will be pure olive green. Like that. And voila. We get a nice little transition. So, now we will finish up the beard. And for that I will use, good question, that's a good question, what should I use? So we started with a Mornfang Brown Evil Sun Scarlet, then with a wash. Let's think a moment. Okay, I think I will go for an hot orange Mornfang Brown mix for that. So let's bring up the palette. So this is a pure experiment here. So a little bit of the orange on the palette. There you can see it. And then a little bit of the brown. Mix it in. Yeah, that's a good color for Gimli's beard. So adjust the paint on the brush, and then we'll go very slightly over it and highlight the top parts very gently, not too much, only a little bit. See? Give it this nice fiery orangey look that Gimli has at his beard, and it's not unusual bright like, for example, a Slayer from Warhammer Fantasy. It's quite subtle orangey reddish beard. always keep experimenting with your colors. Don't don't let yourself be chained by the color pots. You can always mix your colors to create your own colors. So now I will go in the face and give him a nice facial skin tone, and for that I use here, like previously, the Rossi Flash, and like before with the orange I will mix in a tiny little bit of a red tone. Yeah, that is a little bit too pinkish, so let's take a little bit of that brown here. Yeah, I guess that's a good skin tone. So let's test. Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. So now we will place in a little bit of the Vallejo model color ivory. Just a tiny little bit. Like that. And highlight the nose. Yeah, that looks good. That looks really good. And I guess Gimli is almost finished. Only thing left to do is a little bit of gold parts here and there. For that I use here this Auric Armor Gold from GW. So this needs to be shaken a little bit more. There we go. And with that I'll paint in now here this little lines. Very carefully, just with the tip of the brush. Just like that. To give him a very, very slight indication of golden fabric. Very carefully. There you go. So, same on the back side here. I could also go ahead and highlight now the boots and all the little brown areas, but I think like that, though, so dulled down, that's totally okay. So then here, these little parts are also gold, and I guess here the front of his helmet, this part is also gold. So, and here the little tip of the axe, and here the front part of the shaft should be gold. Okay, and there we have it, an almost complete Gimli. Now all we have to do is finish up the base, and for that I use my trusty dry brush. Here, small dry brush. I use again Ashen Grey. palette. And with that I traverse the base. And for those of you that also want to make painting tutorials or whatsoever, always keep the background in one solid color so the camera keeps focusing on the miniature itself and not the background. Many people use these green cutting maps, like this here. Under that here is one of those green cutting maps, but they have this yellow stripes on them, and well, the camera is always focusing on that. If you absolutely want to use this green cutting map, then I would totally recommend you take some nail polish cleaner, Nagellackentferner, and wipe off the yellow stripes of your green cutting map. And with that, you can use that as background if you want to. So now I will put in a little dot of ivory. Again here, vallejo model color ivory, into the ashing gray. Yeah, and with that I will again dry brush here the rocks. Make it random, as random as possible. And voila, we have a finished Gimli. Isn't that cute? Let's paint up the corner of the base. I use Montfang Brown for that. Okay. And the last strokes. Making it even. No, come on. Yeah. And there we go. The finished Gimli the dwarf. I hope you liked this little tutorial. And we see us in the next video. Your Alexandra.